My parents gave my childhood home to my younger sister without telling me, even though I had been paying the mortgage for 8 years. I still remember staring at the letter on my kitchen table when everything started falling apart. It was from the bank, not my parents, which already felt strange. At first, I thought it was a routine update about the mortgage. I had been paying it every month for 8 years without missing a single payment. The house was supposed to be mine eventually, or so I believed. My parents had asked me to help them out when my dad's business collapsed. They said it was temporary just until they got back on their feet. But the letter said the mortgage account had been transferred into a different name. That name was my younger sister's, the same sister my parents always called their golden child. My stomach dropped as I read it over and over again. I thought it had to be a mistake, some clerical error. But deep down, I already knew this wasn't accidental. Something about the way my family had been acting for months suddenly made sense. The sudden distance, the vague answers, the way they avoided talking about the house. I just didn't know the full truth yet, and it was about to get worse. I called my mom immediately, my hands shaking as I held the phone. She answered like nothing was wrong, like it was just another normal day. When I asked her about the mortgage letter, there was a long silence. That silence told me everything before she even spoke. She finally said it was complicated, and I needed to understand family comes first. I asked her how a house I was paying for could belong to someone else. She told me I was just helping, not actually owning anything. That word hit harder than I expected. Helping for 8 years didn't feel like just helping. It felt like betrayal wrapped in years of sacrifice. My dad then got on the phone and tried to calm me down. He said my sister needed stability more than I did. He said I was doing well enough on my own already. Something inside me cracked when he said that so casually. They had rewritten my entire contribution as something disposable. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. I drove to the house that same night without telling them. It was still my childhood home, or at least I thought it was. The lights were on when I arrived, which confused me immediately. My sister's car was parked in the driveway like she belonged there. I sat in my car for several minutes just staring at it. Memories of growing up in that house kept flooding back. I remembered fixing broken pipes with my dad when I was 16. I remembered repainting the living room with my mom every summer, and I remembered every single mortgage payment I made to keep it alive. I finally walked up to the front door with trembling hands before I could knock. The door opened from the inside. My sister looked surprised, but not guilty or shocked. She looked like someone who expected me eventually. That made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't explain. She said I should come inside because we needed to talk. That sentence alone confirmed my worst fear was real. Inside the house, everything looked different but familiar at the same time. Some furniture had been replaced, like pieces of my life were erased. Family photos were still on the walls, but rearranged. My sister's things were already spread across the living room. It felt like I had walked into a version of my life that excluded me. She told me Mom and Dad had signed everything over last month. She said it was supposed to be a surprise for me too, eventually. I laughed because I thought she was joking or misunderstanding something, but her expression stayed serious, almost defensive. She insisted I was never supposed to own it officially. She said I had agreed to just help temporarily years ago. I reminded her about every payment I had made since then. She shrugged and said I was repaid by being allowed to live life freely. That sentence made my blood run cold. It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was revision of reality. I left the house without arguing further because I couldn't breathe. The next morning, I went straight to my parents' home. They acted like nothing had happened the night before. My mom even asked if I wanted breakfast like usual. I refused and demanded a full explanation about the transfer. My dad finally admitted they had signed the deed months ago. He said they didn't tell me because I would react emotionally. I asked him how anyone is supposed to react calmly to theft. He didn't like that word and told me to be respectful. Respect felt meaningless at that point. I told them I had been paying the mortgage for 8 years. My mom said those payments kept the family afloat, not the house. That distinction felt like a legal loophole they created in their minds. I asked if they had ever intended to tell me. My dad avoided eye contact for the first time. My mom said they assumed I would understand eventually. I realized they had rewritten history to avoid guilt. I left their house and started digging into paperwork that same day. I pulled every bank record, every transfer, every receipt I had saved. I even checked old emails and messages about the mortgage arrangement. What I found made my stomach turn even more. The mortgage was still technically under my father's name. My payments had never been credited toward ownership, only family support. It was a structure designed to look like contribution, not equity. Somewhere along the way, I had confused responsibility with ownership. But I still couldn't understand how my sister ended up with the deed. That part felt hidden like a missing piece of a larger scheme. I decided to talk to the bank directly the next day. I needed answers that my family clearly wouldn't give me. At the bank, the manager looked uncomfortable the moment he saw my file. He told me the deed transfer had been legally executed. He confirmed my sister was now the registered property owner. When I asked who authorized it, he hesitated before answering. He said all 3 of my family members had signed. That meant my parents had done it willingly and deliberately. But what shocked me more was what he said next. He mentioned there was a clause I had apparently agreed to informally. I had never signed anything like that knowingly. He showed me a scanned document with my name typed on it. The signature looked close to mine, but slightly off in pressure. My hands started shaking because I knew I had never signed that. It was either forged or manipulated in some way I didn't understand. The manager suggested I take it to a legal professional immediately. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every memory of my family felt contaminated with doubt. I kept replaying conversations where I was thanked for helping. I started wondering if those words had always been intentional misdirection. The next morning, I visited a lawyer recommended by a coworker. She reviewed everything carefully and asked me questions I wasn't ready for. After an hour, she told me something that made my chest tighten. She said this wasn't just a family dispute, it was structured deception. She explained how informal agreements can be manipulated without clear consent. She also pointed out inconsistencies in the signature document. She suspected it was either traced or digitally altered. But proving intent would be the hardest part. She asked if I was prepared to potentially sue my own family. I didn't answer immediately because I wasn't sure I was. Over the next week, I stopped talking to all of them. My phone kept ringing, mostly my mom and sister. My dad only texted once, saying I was overreacting. That word again. Like my emotions were the problem. Meanwhile, I kept digging deeper into financial records. I found something unexpected buried in old bank statements. Large withdrawals had been made around the time of the transfer. Those withdrawals matched legal processing fees and title changes. My sister's account showed sudden funding right before the deed change. It looked like everything had been orchestrated in advance. I started to realize this wasn't a last-minute decision. It had been planned quietly over months, maybe even years, and I had been completely excluded from every step. One evening, my sister showed up at my apartment uninvited. She said she wanted to fix things before they got worse. I let her in because I needed answers more than peace. She looked nervous for the first time since this started. She admitted she knew I had been paying all along, but she insisted she never asked for the house specifically. She said Mom and Dad insisted it would balance the family. I asked her what that even meant. She said they believed I was too independent to need inheritance. She said I had already built my life outside the family. That logic felt like punishment disguised as fairness. I asked her if she felt guilty. She hesitated before saying she felt caught in the middle. That answer told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't innocent, but she wasn't the mastermind either. The real control had always come from my parents. My sister then said something that changed the entire perspective. She mentioned my parents had been struggling with debt again. She said the house was used as leverage for another loan. That explained the sudden urgency behind the transfer. They hadn't just given her the house. They had used it to solve another financial problem, and I had unknowingly been the one keeping everything stable. My entire contribution had been used as invisible collateral. Not ownership, not investment, just survival for their system. I went back to the lawyer the next day with new information. She said the case was becoming more complex but stronger. She recommended freezing any further transactions immediately. We filed a formal dispute against the deed transfer. That was the first time I felt like I had some control back. But emotionally, I was still unraveling. Every memory of that house now felt like evidence in disguise. Even childhood moments felt different under this new understanding. I started wondering how long this imbalance had existed, and whether I had been chosen as the responsible one all along. 2 weeks later, I received a call from my father. His voice sounded tired, almost defeated. He said we needed to talk face-to-face immediately. I agreed, but only in a public place. When we met, he looked older than I remembered. He didn't start by defending himself this time. Instead, he admitted they had made a mistake. But he also said they never intended to hurt me. He said they thought I would always understand. That sentence hurt more than anger ever could, because it meant they truly believed this was acceptable. He finally revealed the full reason behind everything. My sister had been struggling with hidden financial instability. She had accumulated debt they never told me about. They feared she would lose everything if they didn't intervene, so they decided to consolidate everything under her name, including the house I had been maintaining. They convinced themselves it was a family protection strategy. I asked him where that left me after 8 years of payments. He said those payments were part of being family. That was the final emotional breaking point for me, because family had been used as a justification for erasure. I stood up and told him I was done discussing it, not because I had closure, but because I finally saw the pattern. Everything had been framed as love while extracting from me silently. I walked away knowing nothing would be the same again. Months later, the legal case is still ongoing. The house is temporarily frozen in dispute. My relationship with my family is effectively non-existent now, but the hardest truth is what I realized after everything. I wasn't just betrayed over a house. I was assigned a role in a family system that depended on my silence, and the most unsettling part is how long I played it without knowing.